one of the world's most famous natural landmarks soon be a vision of the past? Water levels are dropping at an alarming rate, going down by more than 1 meter or 3 feet each year.
In the lowest, saltiest place on Earth, where life was never meant to exist, fish are now swimming. Scientists are stunned. Locals are speechless. But 2,600 years ago, a prophet saw this moment coming. Is the Dead Sea coming alive? Or is Bible prophecy unfolding before our very eyes? Stay with us till the end, because what will be revealed is going to shock you. The unthinkable is happening at the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea has always been known as a place where nothing lives. Its salty water is nearly 10 times saltier than the ocean, making it impossible for fish or plants to survive. For centuries, it's been a symbol of judgment and desolation, a place of silence, stillness, and decay. Tourists float on its dense surface, but no living creature swims beneath. It has stood for lifelessness in every sense of the word. But that reputation is now being challenged. Along the shrinking edges of the Dead Sea, strange sinkholes are opening up. What's even more surprising is what's inside them. Pools of fresh water, clear, calm, and completely different from the salty sea just steps away. And in these pools, something truly shocking is happening. Fish are swimming. Freshwater fish are now living in areas that were once poisoned by salt. Scientists have found small, thriving ecosystems forming inside some of the sinkholes. Reeds are growing, insects are moving in, and the fish are alive and well. These are not fossils or planted samples. They are living proof that the landscape is changing in ways no one predicted. Experts have offered a few theories, but none are complete. Some believe underground springs may be leaking fresh water into the holes. Others think deep aquifers are finding their way to the surface through cracks in the earth. But that doesn't fully explain how fish got there or how they're surviving. There's no clear answer, only a growing mystery. The evidence shows life is returning, even though science doesn't yet know why. The Dead Sea is shrinking fast. Over the past 40 years, its water level has dropped by more than 100 feet. As the water disappears, the ground becomes unstable and caves in. That's how the sinkholes began forming, hundreds of them across the landscape. Some are small. Others have swallowed entire buildings, roads, and orchards. In the middle of this slow collapse, something unexpected is unfolding. What should be a scene of loss is instead becoming one of revival. In place of empty craters, we now see freshwater oases. It's like nature is rewriting the story, quietly and without warning. Even locals who've lived near the sea for decades are stunned by the change. Cameras have captured these changes up close. Footage shows researchers walking to the edge of sinkholes, pointing out fish darting through clear water. There are reeds lining the pools, soft mud where salt once cracked the earth, and signs of life growing. These scenes are being shared across news outlets and social media, and every image leads to the same question: how is this possible? One particularly fascinating site near the Ein-Gedi Nature Reserve has drawn attention. This area, named in ancient texts, now hosts one of the largest known sinkhole pools filled with fish. That detail matters because it ties into something much older than science or modern geography. It connects directly to a 2,600-year-old prophecy, one that mentioned fish and healing waters flowing into this very region. The exact locations mentioned in ancient texts are now matching what's unfolding today. All of this makes one thing clear: something strange is happening. Something that challenges what we've always believed about the Dead Sea. It's not just about geology or water tables. It might be something deeper. The land itself is telling a story. And for those who know where to look, it sounds a lot like prophecy. What if an ancient exile saw something we're only now beginning to witness? Living water bringing life to a dead sea. The prophecy of Ezekiel. Over 2,600 years ago, during the Jewish exile in Babylon, a prophet named Ezekiel had a vision. It came at a time of destruction, when Jerusalem lay in ruins and the temple was gone. But instead of despair, Ezekiel described something no one expected: water flowing from the temple. In his vision, the water moved eastward through the desert and into the Salt Sea, which we now call the Dead Sea. What he saw next was a complete reversal of what anyone knew about that land. Ezekiel paints a vivid picture. As the water travels, it grows deeper, wider, and more powerful. By the time it reaches the Salt Sea, it transforms the dead water into something fresh. In verses 8 and 9, Ezekiel writes, "When the water flows into the sea, the water becomes fresh. Wherever the river flows, every living creature that swarms will live, and there will be very many fish." That detail stands out. Many fish. Not just a few, not just symbolic life, but real, thriving creatures. This was written about a place that couldn't even support bacteria in its salty depths. Yet Ezekiel describes a future where fish live in abundance, where trees grow on the banks, and the land heals. This wasn't wishful thinking. It was specific and tied to a very real location we can see today. For generations, most scholars and readers treated Ezekiel's vision as purely spiritual. It was seen as a metaphor, water representing God's presence, flowing from the temple to heal broken lives. And while that spiritual message still holds weight, what's unfolding near the Dead Sea today makes people wonder if it's more than a symbol. Because we're not just seeing fresh water, we're seeing actual fish in the exact region Ezekiel described. The transformation he saw wasn't vague or mystical. It was detailed, grounded in physical change. He described a land turning from barren to fertile, from judged to restored. He mentioned fishermen standing along the shores, spreading their nets from En-Gedi to En-Eglem, two real places still on the Dead Sea's map. These names weren't just poetic, they were tied to geography, anchoring the prophecy in a real-world setting. The connection grows even stronger when you look at the timing. The vision was written during exile, a time of loss and uncertainty for Israel. Yet even then, Ezekiel spoke of renewal. And now, thousands of years later, as Israel has returned and the land has started to bloom again, we're seeing signs that mirror what he saw. The land itself seems to be following the same path: judgment, exile, return, and then life. What's happening today isn't just interesting because of science or climate. It's powerful because of how closely it follows the ancient pattern. Water is appearing where there was none before. Life is growing where only salt existed. It feels like the land is echoing something spoken long ago. This isn't about turning a story into proof. It's about seeing how the pieces line up. Ezekiel couldn't have known the geography would change like this. Yet he described a healing river, reaching the sea that no one thought could be healed. And now, that sea is starting to stir. A new layer to consider is how prophecy often plays out in steps. First the vision, then the signs, and finally, the fulfillment. We might be living in the early stages of that final step. The vision has been here all along, but now the world is starting to catch up. And the Dead Sea, once only a symbol of death, may be waking up as part of something far bigger. Echoes from other prophets and the New Testament. Ezekiel wasn't the only one who spoke of waters flowing from Jerusalem and transforming the land. Another prophet, Zechariah, had a strikingly similar vision. In Zechariah 14:8, he wrote, "On that day, living waters will flow out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea." The eastern sea is widely recognized as the Dead Sea. This reinforces the idea that something more than symbolic was being described. It pointed to a real location and a real transformation. In the Bible, living water is a powerful symbol. It represents more than just water. It's tied to life, cleansing, and the presence of God. In a desert land where water means survival, this kind of imagery carried deep meaning. Living water brought healing, renewal, and restoration. So when prophets spoke of living water flowing from the heart of Jerusalem, they were describing both physical change and spiritual revival. That theme continues in the New Testament. In John 7:38, Jesus says, "Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them." Again, the water isn't just about hydration. It points to a change from within, a life touched by God's Spirit. And then, in Revelation 22, the final chapter of the Bible, we see the vision completed, a river of life flowing from God's throne, with the tree of life on its banks, and healing for the nations. The message remains consistent from the prophets to the apostles. Life comes where there was death. Water flows where it once could not. Healing begins in places that were once judged and forgotten. The Dead Sea, once tied to destruction, now mirrors that promise in a surprising way. To understand this more fully, we can look all the way back to Genesis. In Genesis 13:10, the land around the Jordan Valley was described as lush and well-watered, like the garden of the Lord. But not long after, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah fell under judgment, and the land became what we now call the Dead Sea region, from paradise to desolation. That arc, blessing, judgment, and now signs of renewal, is the deeper pattern that runs through the entire biblical story. And now we're seeing a new twist in that pattern. In 2023, a small team of geologists and local experts discovered a hidden underground spring near the Ein Gedi Nature Reserve. It was found beneath one of the larger sinkholes formed by the sea's retreat. What's remarkable is that this spot, Ein Gedi, is mentioned by name in Ezekiel 47:10. He said fishermen would one day stand from En Gedi to Eneglaim, casting nets in water filled with life. That prophecy may be unfolding in real time. Local Bedouin shepherds have started reporting changes near the spring. Birds are returning, frogs are heard croaking again, and small fish are being spotted in nearby pools. This isn't just an isolated event. It's happening in the exact stretch of land Ezekiel mentioned, giving his vision an incredibly precise anchor in the modern landscape. The Dead Sea isn't healed yet, but the signs are growing. Springs are breaking through. Ecosystems are forming. Life is returning in slow, quiet waves. When seen alongside these ancient prophecies, it raises serious questions one's science can't fully answer, but Scripture might. From desolation to rebirth, the land of Israel is blooming. Could the sea's revival be the next step in prophecy? From judgment to redemption. The Dead Sea is more than just a geographical location. In the Bible, it stands as a symbol of judgment. Its salty waters, lifeless shores, and sun-scorched valleys reflect what happens when sin brings destruction. The region was once lush and green, like the garden of the Lord. But after the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah, it became a barren wasteland. That transformation, from life to lifelessness, mirrors the story of Israel itself. Israel's journey through Scripture follows a pattern: blessing, rebellion, judgment, exile, and finally, redemption. The Dead Sea region, especially with its ties to divine judgment, seems to capture that same rhythm. But in the Bible, judgment is never the end. There's always a promise of return, of healing, of something greater to come. That's where the deeper meaning of the Dead Sea's revival begins to take shape. In Ezekiel 36, just before the vision of healing waters, God speaks directly about this redemption. He says, "I will sprinkle clean water on you. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you." This promise wasn't just about physical water. It was about spiritual change. God wasn't just restoring land. He was restoring people. This sets the stage for what we're seeing today, both in the land and in the heart of the nation. In 1948, after centuries of exile, the Jewish people returned to their homeland. It was a physical return, but it also marked the beginning of national restoration. Hebrew, once nearly forgotten, became a living language again. Towns rose, deserts bloomed, and the people began to rebuild. Isaiah 27:6 said it long ago, "Israel shall blossom and bud, and fill the face of the world with fruit." That prophecy is now visible. Israel, once dry and scattered, is now a leader in global agriculture and innovation. Places that were once deserts now grow grapes, olives, and dates. Their produce is shipped across the world, turning former wastelands into fields of abundance. It's as if the land itself were waiting for the people to return. And now it's responding. The Dead Sea's revival might be the next step in this unfolding story. We've seen the physical return. We've seen the deserts bloom. And now, at the lowest point on Earth, water is flowing and fish are swimming. That pattern, land first, then people, is worth paying attention to. The Bible often points to nature as a reflection of spiritual change. Could the Dead Sea be more than a natural wonder? Could it be a signal that something deeper is coming? If God is healing the land, maybe He's preparing to heal the hearts. Just as He promised through Ezekiel, new life could follow both in the waters and in the people. The dry valley of judgment might now be shifting into a symbol of mercy and hope. One new insight lies in how restoration usually begins small. The fish in the sinkholes, the reeds sprouting by the shore, they don't make headlines, but they quietly speak to a shift taking place under the surface. And just like that, revival often begins unseen, in places where no one is watching. Not all miracles are loud. Some whisper from the cracks, just like fish swimming quietly where no life was ever expected. Are we witnessing fulfilled prophecy? The idea of biblical prophecy coming true in modern times can feel distant, but history shows it's happened before. In Ezekiel 26, the prophet described in detail the destruction of the ancient city of Tyre. He said the stones and wood would be thrown into the sea. Centuries later, that's exactly what Alexander the Great did when he built a causeway to the island using the ruins of Tyre, just as Ezekiel had written. That event wasn't vague or poetic. It was precise and factual. It was a prophecy fulfilled in stone, in action, in history. So if Ezekiel 26 came true with such accuracy, why should Ezekiel 47 be treated as symbolic? That vision speaks of water flowing into the Dead Sea and bringing it to life. If one prophecy unfolded with bricks and dust, perhaps this one is now unfolding with water and fish. But this time, it's not happening with the clash of armies or the rise of empires. It's happening slowly, quietly. Small pools of fresh water are forming near the Dead Sea. Fish are swimming where salt once choked every living thing. These aren't loud miracles, they're whispers. And in Scripture, that's often how God speaks. Think of Elijah, who looked for God in the wind, the fire, and the earthquake, but heard him instead in a still, small voice. The most meaningful changes often come in silence. That may be what's happening here. The Dead Sea isn't suddenly overflowing with rivers, but something has begun. A shift no one predicted. A change not driven by policy or science, but nature itself responding to something deeper. Ezekiel's vision doesn't end with water. It ends with presence. In his final words, he says, "The name of the restored city will be, 'The Lord is there.'" Ezekiel 48:35. That's the heart of the prophecy, not just a healed sea, but a world where God dwells among his people. The restoration of land is just the beginning. The real promise is divine presence, God returning, God remaining. This same vision appears again in the New Testament. Revelation 22 describes a river of life flowing from the throne of God. It waters the tree of life, whose leaves bring healing to the nations. It's a picture of the world made whole. And it starts with water, living water, flowing where it was never supposed to, just like we're seeing now near the Dead Sea. Could the return of life to the Dead Sea be the beginning of that final restoration? Could these quiet signs be pointing to something bigger? No one can say for sure. But the pattern is striking. A prophecy once seen as symbolic now looks possible, real, physical, and in motion. Here's a new insight. Some archaeologists believe the newly forming springs near Ein Gedi are reshaping the underground water networks beneath the desert. As the land shifts and breaks, water is being released that has been sealed underground for thousands of years. These springs may have been part of the natural system in ancient times and could be the same waters Ezekiel saw in his vision. Not symbolic, just hidden, waiting for the right moment. So now we watch, not for earthquakes, not for fire from the sky, but for signs written into the landscape. A tree growing by a sinkhole, a school of fish in a freshwater pool. A valley once cursed is now breathing again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.